The thing that I found equally hard to stomach is the sheer number of people that, if they were they looking inside the nonprofit sector, or were they going to look outside, or were they unsure? In the first year, we had about 35% of people say that for sure they want to stick in the nonprofit sector, which isn't great, but that dropped several percentage points to just over 30% last year. So the number of people who are in that, I definitely don't want to stay in the sector, or I'm not sure, one more terrible boss is going to knock me out, another great boss might keep me in. That to me has been one of the more staggering percentages there, because when you think of how much control, that's the wrong word, but how much control a manager has over the well-being of their employees and thereby the mission that gets delivered, you could be the last stop before someone decides to fully flee the sector and go make coffee.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's LinkedIn Live. How should modern executive directors think about staff retention? I've been really excited for this one. So like in that video that you just saw, we talked a lot at CoachArt about technology and digital marketing, and those are the things that most publicly we talked about and people looked at for growing the organization. But I always thought the real secret sauce was staff retention. And that when I joined CoachArt, the staff retention, the average tenure of our team, I think was like 1.1 or 1.2 years. And by the time I left at the end of last year, it was over 6 years. And people staying and creating a culture where everybody kind of leaned in and wanted to be part of the team because of the other amazing people that were part of the team. That was sort of like less public than the technology and the digital marketing, but I think even more important. And so our guest today is very much an expert in staff retention. Excited to welcome Evan Wildstein to the show. He's a proud nonprofiteer, and I think the creator of that term. I have been meaning to ask him, the first person that I ever heard use it, and a big believer in building cultures at nonprofits that value the people. He's been working in this sector for 20 plus years inside organizations, raising funds, developing programs, and really growing programs for the people who work on the teams. By day, he oversees advancement efforts for the Post Oak School, but he juggles many nonprofiteer side projects, including co-hosting the Good Nonsense podcast. He wrote the Nonprofiteers fundraising field guide, and the project that he is here representing today, essentially, he's the co-leader of the Social Impact Staff Retention Research Project. Evan, welcome to the show. Excited to be able to chat with you.
I have to tell my mother about this introduction because that was lovely. Thank you.
Well, you've got so much good stuff that you're doing all the time. Whenever I see a new project that you're working on, it's like, how does he juggle all of this important work? And this one being, to me, my favorite thing of everything that you do. So we always like to start by asking people, why does this topic matter? And people usually cite a research report or something like that. You literally create the research about why this matters and the data about why this matters. So tell us, out of everything that you found, what do you think is the most important statistic for why EDs should focus on staff retention?
We don't have enough time in the world for it, but I would say there are some fundamentals that are really important, other than it being, you've run shops, I've run teams. We intrinsically know it's the right thing to do. There's let's say a fiduciary element to this. I think for most organizations, you can probably tether something around 80% of an organization's budget to its people. There's the Richard Bransonian mentality that if you treat your employees well, the whole client consumer experience will be better. And people will always transition work. I think especially in this particular environment, we're not seeing anything that you and I haven't seen over the past 20, 30 years in this field. The pace at which it's getting weirder is happening more hastily. But
weirder is a good term. It is weirder. Getting weirder. It absolutely is.
It's harder to find great people, not because they're not necessarily out there, but it's sort of abysmal to be looking right now. From what I've heard, I did just grow my team this summer, and just going through the hiring manager perspective of this, it's very weird. And no one's going to deliver the work that is really important for your organization better than people who are cared for, listened to, treated fairly and equitably and all those things. And I think sometimes what we found in this research, we'll probably talk about it here, is a lot of the ways to flex and be good with your people is fairly low cost. I mean, there's like a mental and an emotional cost to it, but it's not always about just raising salaries, because there's all the data out there that show up to a certain point. I mean, you can't pay poverty wages. I think this field's got away with that for far too long. But all things considered equal, there are things we ought to be doing for our teams to keep them with us, keep them happy, and it sort of goes both ways.
And we will talk about that more in just a minute, but that was one of the most astonishing things that came out of the 2025 report to me, was how many of the reasons why people both wanted to leave and wanted to stay really didn't have costs associated with it. But there was one statistic that, I think you all led the report with that got everybody's attention. Can you say what that was about how many people are thinking about leaving their role right now?
Yeah, and so we are now in the midst of collecting our third year of this data. So we have for the first two, and I think by the time we release the 2026 report, we'll have a little arc of things that will demonstrate if we're looking at fads or trends, and I believe that they're trends. But the average over the past 2 years is that 7 in 10 nonprofit employees are currently looking or will be looking over the next year. And that's everyone from marketing people, programs, CEOs, executive directors, fundraisers. But I would say, and I don't know if we plan to get to this particular point, but the thing that strikes me almost more than that, because Nonprofit HR did a survey, I think in 2018, 2019, that showed 45% of nonprofit people are looking. Now, once the pandemic hit, things got exacerbated and weirder.
Weirder.
And it hasn't really slowed down. There was like a couple years where staff really had the upper hand, as it were. I've heard that referred to that way. And then it really flipped back to be much more of an employer-centric environment there. But the thing that I found equally hard to stomach is the sheer number of people that, if they were looking, were they looking inside the nonprofit sector, or were they going to look outside, or were they unsure? We're tweaking that question a little bit this year, because we want to know if people who are looking to leave, maybe they want to go adjacent. They want to go consult. They want to coach. They want to stay in the social sector, but just being employed by a C3, as it were, is just not up the alley. But in the first year, we had about 35% of people say that for sure they want to stick in the nonprofit sector, which isn't great, but that dropped several percentage points to just over 30% last year. So the number of people who are in that, I definitely don't want to stay in the sector, or I'm not sure, one more terrible boss is going to knock me out, another great boss might keep me in. That to me has been one of the more staggering percentages there, because when you think of how much control, that's the wrong word, but how much control a manager has over the well-being of their employees and thereby the mission that gets delivered, you could be the last stop before someone decides to fully flee the sector and go make coffee. And we're not talking 20%, we're talking 60 some odd percent of people who are ready to flee, or they're just not sure. And that to me is almost as staggering as the 7 in 10 who are thinking about looking and leaving.
Yeah, it totally is. And, if you run an organization or run a team and your jaw did not drop when you saw, or if you're learning right now that 7 out of 10 people are looking, and close to 7 out of 10 are looking at leaving the sector entirely. I mean, that is a crisis, a personnel crisis in the sector that you can layer on top of all the other weird crises that we've got going on. I really liked how you all frame it, the metric that you think is most important related to staff retention, because we hear people in our sector talk about it so much in sort of ethical or integrity terms. But I love the metric that you pointed out. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Remind me.
The idea of the cost of staff, what the impact that it has when staff does depart.
Yeah, and I hate the fact, although the data is necessary, I hate the fact that we always have to point to financials and zeros and ones. But, I'm in fundraising fundamentally. And so I think it was Penelope Burke and others that have really pointed to the direct and indirect costs of what happens when you have a relationship builder, like a fundraiser, leave their work. And it's something like 6 figures over the course of several years. And that's not just the salary, that's the cost to replace them. That's the cost of the damaged relationship. And most organizations, again, that figure that I touted at the top, corporate, non-for-profit, whatever, about 80% of most organizations' budget is tethered to people. So if you think about the cost of replacing those roles, you've got the vacancy, you've got the work that has to get spread around. And in a lot of organizations, it doesn't get spread back to the people that are rehired if they backfill roles. So if you look at it like can we afford this $5,000 raise versus the $250,000 that might walk out the door because of that lost raise, I think there's a lot of short-sightedness there. And I know budgets are tight. I'm looking in one of our city's business journals here, and it talks about all the major corporate entities that are laying off 10, 15, 20% of workforces. We keep coming back to it being a weird time, but how modern EDs, I think, really need to think about this. And I kind of wish they were forever. But there's a responsibility we have, I think, to the people we serve to ensure that we're doing the most right things by the people who work in our shops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, and one of the things, it's yes, and it's both that, I always think it's almost as if we position it like the for-profit sector is paying more because they're better, more generous people. And the reality is they pay more because they know exactly what you just said, that turnover is a growth killer. And so they invest to prevent that. Whereas we make these, just purely sort of kind of ethical arguments for why we should pay people more, but we're ignoring the second argument, that you point out, that kind of it is killing the growth and has been for decades. So I do want to get into what the 2025 survey uncovered. You all lead with the reasons why people are leaving. I actually wanted to flip it if we can. And Chris, our producer, if we can pull up the top reasons, because I loved this part for the people, the 30% of people, I presume, who answered this question, who aren't looking to leave. Why? And can you talk through some of these and how a modern ED should think about this, what their takeaways from this part of the report should be, in your opinion?
Mm-hmm. The one that's not surprising to anyone who's lived through working during the pandemic is both years. The figure 78% hybrid or remote flexibility dropped a little bit from the year prior, but not much, just a couple percentage points. But both years, there's a couple things we can point to that I think are, if you pay attention to anything, pay attention to this. There was this flip back where the return to work philosophy, which I believe in. I'm an in-person employee now. It's the kind of thing that I was looking for. I worked remotely for about 4.5 years. And my wife would always remind me that it was kind of killing my vibe as a human being. I really like being around other people. But being in person or being some sort of semblance of hybrid, it doesn't necessarily mean that the hours worked in the office is the thing that translates to productivity. I think there are a lot of managers who can't quite separate those two things out. If the work is getting done and you can justify flexing for people, if you were in 2019 a 5-day, 40, 45-hour-a-week in office organization, I think we failed to realize that people work, it's not even work-life balance or work-life integration, it's just there's life and work is part of it. We have a young toddler at home. I mean, he goes to school now, but we have a young toddler at home. He gets sick. I am so thrilled to be in a place that realizes that life happens and I might need to go to the dentist. I might need to go miss a day and a half of work or work from home because my kiddo is sick or that there's a repair that needs to happen. I think we sort of forgot that very quickly in the post-pandemic years. And for the people who are not looking, the ability to be humans in their work, that I need to go to the doctor's visit, I got to go do things like that. That great, 8 and 10 people telling us that they're willing to stay in their job because they have that sort of flexibility. And that could mean hybrid work. That could mean remote work. But it could also be other ways that their employer, their boss lets them flex around it. That could sometimes be taking on interesting projects that are not directly related to the particular employee's specific workload, but really does support their growth and supports the organization. So if there's one thing other than that sheer sort of alarming statistic of the amount of people who are looking, if there's one thing that EDs listening to this are thinking through, like, well, we have 5 days a week in the office. I can't see a reason why the programs team couldn't do 1 day off site or something like that. That is for some people, that's a high mental or emotional cost to flexing your own thinking on that. But in a world that is really offering those opportunities for people in different environments, you don't want to be the organization who's not doing it. because people won't look there. And if you follow some of these conversations on LinkedIn and elsewhere, there's a lot of people railing against organizations that say, we're fully remote, but we need you to be near the office in case we need you to come in. Like, that's going to offend some people. And I actually think people misunderstand the whole remote versus distributed work. I think distributed work can happen anywhere in the world, whatever time, as long as you're getting it done. I do believe there could be some place-basedness when it comes to remote work, because you might want someone who's a marketer in the city, so you know what people in the city are interested in. But flexibility above all else, some of those other points that you put up there, good and encouraging work environment, good alignment with the mission, that's generally the kind of people that we want working with and for us, right? We want people who, maybe it wasn't the mission that brought them there, but they have a strong belief in that mission being important. And good, encouraging work environment. You don't have to go buy cookies for everyone every Friday, although that's lovely. But in your standing meetings with your employees, did you turn that meeting over to the employee? So it's not your weekly meeting as the ED or the manager, but it's their meeting. They craft the agenda, they do that. Is that just a running checklist of things that need to get done this week? Or do you have 3 minutes on the agenda for, Greg, how's it going? How's it going with the kids? I know Jimmy had a baseball game last week. How'd that go? I can't tell you what that buys you in currency. And I think folks listening might say, we don't have time to be social. There's so much to do. We have all these grants to write. I got to backfill this role. You're going to cost yourself more headache and heartache and dollars if you don't build those good, encouraging things into the environment.
Yeah. Yep. And Chris, if you could put those up one more time. One of the things, and Evan, you pointed this out, that these aren't things that necessarily cost a lot. I mean, one thing that just occurred to me looking through this list is, at least for us at CoachArt, combined, this going in this direction saved money. Starting with that first point, we moved from a traditional office space into co-working spaces, and that cut our rent, our cost for office space by 70% immediately. And then it was more hybrid and remote, where if people went in, because if you have people going into an empty office, as long as people went in, they had other people to work with, et cetera. And then we switched to quarterly performance reviews. And one of the 3 questions that we would ask every time, maybe 4 questions, was, is there anything that the organization could do differently that would make you more excited about your work here and staying here in the long term? And sometimes people had really interesting answers to that and ideas and things that came from that, some of which we could do, some of which we couldn't. But I think even just asking the question, which is a version of that, checking in on Fridays, how are you doing? But checking in once a quarter and saying, like, what would make you continue to be excited about the work? Is one of those things that then also relates to that second point of kind of like, what can keep you tied to the mission and all that good stuff. And so, the idea, and I know it's something that you and I both believe in, that it's just this monetary thing that, we don't have the money to be able to retain staff, that it just simply is not true.
Yeah, I would say, you always make me think of good things. I would say 1, possibly 2, if my short-term lapsing memory can stick with me for like 30 seconds. But on the flip side, when we think of those people who are looking, that 7 in 10 people who are looking to leave, we're very early in the data collection for this year, so I'm not exactly sure how this is going to play out, though my suspicion is that we'll see similar findings this year. Second top reason why people say they're looking to leave is that they're lacking growth opportunities. And you and I have both managed teams for a long time. And I think in this sector, because our organizations tend to really look at hierarchically the way that most organizations do, is that growth is much more often seen as a steep thing than a deep thing. And so
say more
steep is, I'm an assistant to a coordinator, to a manager, to a director, to a senior director. And there's a track. You could say, you're really good with the development database. Maybe we want to make you up. And it goes up this way. I think you and I probably also worked with people who are like expert copywriters or an expert prospect researcher, and nothing would make them sadder than being in charge of a team of copywriters or in charge of a team of prospect researchers. Those people don't want to grow steeply. They want to grow deeply. They want to get better at what they do, and they want to think about ways that they can grow as people. And in turn, I think you and I have both seen that translates to better outcomes for the organization. So the thing I said before, that growth doesn't always mean that someone needs, you always want to compensate fairly. You always want to give someone the most appropriate title. But one of the ways I like to think about this is that phrase that a lot of people hate on a job description, other duties as assigned. I want to encourage managers on this call to think of that phrase from the employee's perspective. Someone wants to assign themselves a duty that is not generally part of their job description or day-to-day work, but gosh, that's going to help them get better at Microsoft Excel, or that's going to help them get better at building relationships with the people we need to build relationships with. I didn't see that immediately in front of me. So think about other duties as assigned too as a way for growth. Not that you're going to give them additional tasks beyond what you couldn't think about on that 70-page job description, but that, all right, you've been here 36 months, you see what's working. Is this the job you signed up for? I think that's a great question to ask either quarterly or in the annual review. Is this the job you signed up for? If it is, great. If not, what can we do better? What things do you want to look into that'll, frankly, have this conversation with someone that'll keep you here longer? Because I know if we stretch to meet you, that you will stretch and serve the organization. Don't be afraid of that conversation as a manager. The worst someone can say is, this is a terrible job, I didn't sign up for it, I'm leaving, which is not a great thing. But you may have someone say, I know I really signed up to do database and spreadsheets, but I love the constituents we serve, and I really want to get to know them better. Over the course of a year, 18 months, maybe that person flexes into a programs role or something more outward facing. You don't know until you ask those questions.
Yeah. And Samantha just made a similar point in the chat. The idea sort of steep, deep, and then broad. And, Evan, you're so good with language and turns of phrase. I don't know if you can think of a great rhyme for that one, but it also sort of connects with something I was thinking about when you were talking, where, there's so much talk in the nonprofit sector about, well, how much are we investing in professional development? What does the professional development budget look like? And while that can be a budgetary issue, there's also just so much free professional development content out there now that it also is just a time and interest. And, to Samantha's point, sort of a question, are there things that you want to learn how to do and even just go off and find free tools? If you're not a copywriter, do you want to go figure out how to do that? Do you want to figure out how to do, any fundraising stuff, are there other lanes that you want to, or pools that you want to dip a toe in that doesn't have to mean paying for a certification program or a conference or anything like that. It can, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah. And I would, again, back to that point about those people who are like one bad experience away from fleeing outside the sector, or the people who just need one manager to listen to them, to feel heard, listened to, and seen. And that's like the thing. One of the kisses of death, I think, in this sector is the manager who openly listens and then nothing happens, nothing changes with the information they learn. And you can't assume. There's a great organization here in Houston called Bridge Year that they do alternative vocational training, for people who don't want to go down the 4-year, 6-year collegial track. And they did a thing during the pandemic where they did an open listening session. And one of the things that people said to the management was, we would love to have a little bit of money, like $20 available, so we could go have coffee with people. And then they went back a year or two later and found that was great during the pandemic. Now we want to move on to something else. So I think the worst thing you can do is pretend to listen to someone and then change nothing. Yep. But even if you do change this thing, you've got to go back with some regularity and keep checking it.
Yeah. Or even if you can't make the change, at least being transparent about that. This change was requested in this survey that we did. We can't do it right now for X, Y, or Z reason, but here's why, so it doesn't just feel like people are shouting into the void. I want to make sure, Chris, can you put up again, I know you did already, the link to the 2026 survey. And it's interesting, Evan, that you said you're starting to get responses already. What are you, I know that you're hesitant to make predictions about the future as a very data-oriented person, but where do you see this all going? What do you think? What are your guesses as to the trends that we're going to see going forward?
One thing I should also mention, Michelle Flores-Vrin, who's my co-rabble-rouser in this effort. She and I started this a few years ago because there was really nothing like this that came from fellow practitioners. There was a lot out there from vendors, and like we like to joke, like the company that will do a survey for your people just to help fix it as long as you pay them. Like there's no paywall here. Right. We collect the data freely, we share it freely. But one of the things that we are adding this year, and I don't know, a funny thing happened in January of this year. You might remember that there were some, political changes.
I heard something about that.
Yeah, I heard something about that. And this is not meant to get political, but what this has spun is a change that is happening a little bit more quickly than we're used to. So when we, some of the way that we're uplifting questions here, that, one of the updated responses is, if you're looking to leave, or if you're looking to stay, does it have anything to do with the current environment? Because for people that are looking to stay, one of the ways that we're asking that question is, and I'm paraphrasing because I forget how we asked it. It's like, if you're looking to stay, is it because you're terrified of the job market right now and you think leaving would be more dangerous than staying, and vice versa on the other side? And so I don't know how that's going to shake out. My naivete wants to say, the data is going to tell us what the data tell us, but I have to imagine that in some double-digit percentage, that's going to be a number of people who are like, I don't know if this job's going to be here in 6 months, so I'm going to jump into the job market and hope my odds are better out there, or vice versa. I'll be curious to see how that looks this year, and if we continue asking that question in that way for the next, 3.5 years.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. And again, it's so critical that you all are doing this important work. And just want to thank you for joining and talking about it. That with all these big meta concerns going out there, going around out there, it can feel overwhelming and impossible and scary when you see the 7 out of 10 people are looking at leaving. And then you see the reasons why they're looking to leave or looking to stay. It's like, oh, this stuff does not cost money. It's very solvable. Let's be more flexible with people, more human, more transparent, more collaborative. Ask people what they want, that it's these really are changes that anyone leading an organization or leading a team could start to implement today and start to see, changes in return on their organization. So while it, this year's report and we'll see next year is a mix of things that are terrifying, but then solutions that feel a lot more easy to reach than they might have seemed.
Yeah, none of this is uncontrollable. If you have resources, financial resources to make available, it makes all of this easier. But really, almost everything that we find, and in each of the 2 years of the report that we've done so far, in the findings, we also have some recommendations for you. If you I don't know where to start, just go look at some of those things. And I do want to say, if people are interested in taking the 2026 survey, they can just go to nonprofitstaff.org. I know that's a different URL that we have up there, but both will get you there. We just wanted to try and make life a little bit easier for people. So nonprofitstaff.org will get you right to the survey tool.
Amazing. That's great. Yeah. Well, all right. Thank you so much, Evan. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Great to be here. Appreciate people talking about stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. It needs to be talked about more. And so thank you all so much for joining us. And I think our video that Chris has queued up is for our online nonprofit Proimpact ED Summit taking place next month, where we're going to be talking about the trends and best practices in every part of running a nonprofit organization, managing a team, programs, fundraising, marketing, tech, and then collaboratively doing breakouts to plan for the future. So we hope to see you there. So thank you all so much for joining.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Strub, Content Marketing Manager for the Proimpact Project. Coming up on Thursday, October 30th, you are invited to the very first Proimpact ED Summit, a virtual event created just for nonprofit executive directors. You'll hear from our founder and former executive director himself, Greg Harrell-Edge, and sector experts on programs, fundraising, marketing, and operations. Plus, you'll get to connect with peers through breakout sessions, one-on-one networking, and our interactive expo hall. It's a day built to inspire you, challenge you, and strengthen your leadership. Register now at proimpact.org/summit. We can't wait to see you there.